It's so much of the criticism that certainly comes out in this interview, but is also present in sort of what else has been written about the book. The heart of it seems to be, why would a Muslim want to write a book about Jesus? And as you say in your book, you outline on the second page sort of where your own religious affiliation and identity lies. But I think this is a question that certainly many of us in this room grapple with, is sort of this tension between the religious life that we may or may not have, the faith and spirituality on one side, and then the academic sort of scholarly side that we're all here, trying to cultivate. And so I think, the question is, where do you see, so how do you see those two spheres of our life intersecting? Do you think that you could have just as well written this book and not explicitly, come out and said, I am a Muslim, but I'm a scholar in the history of religion writing about Jesus? Do you think it's important to sort of acknowledge sort of our own backgrounds, or do you see that as a really different dimension from the scholarly one? How do you see
Jason,
those
that's
two
a
worlds
really,
interacting?
really good question, because there are two things happening in this video, and there's sort of what everyone picks up on, which is this kind of clear anti-Muslim bias of Fox News that they have managed to spin into ratings gold for the last decade or so. And good for them. They've managed to become very successful by trying to convince people that Muslims are going to sneak into their homes at night and eat their children. But there's something else going on here, and it's something that I think we in this room pick up on, and that is her inability, an inability that I think is shared by the vast majority of Americans, to even understand the concept of religion as an academic enterprise. I mean, I think for her, she just doesn't, what do you mean? How could you possibly write about religion from an objective, and by objective we mean as objective as we can be, an objective position, that it just, the very concept makes no sense to her at all. And I have to say, not only do I think that most Americans would agree with that statement, I mean, you're all in div school. Just be honest with me. How often do you sit on a plane and tell someone that you're at div school and they're like, oh my God, did I just cuss? I'm so sorry. Like, are you a priest? Are you being a priest? Is that what you're doing? Is that, because again, this idea that, no, I'm actually studying an academic discipline, in a scientific environment, is a completely foreign concept to a lot of Americans. And I have to be honest with you, that's our fault. It's because we do such a poor job of communicating our skills, our scholarship, our research, our theories to a popular audience. On the contrary, when we try to do so, we are immediately attacked by our colleagues and our superiors as unserious. That, of course, we have fostered this sense of distrust among the people over what we do and what our goals are. Of course, there are Buddhists in this room who write about Christianity. There are Christians in this room who write about Hinduism. There are Hindus in this room that write about Islam. And for us, it just makes perfect sense that we separate our faith, whatever that may be, from our academic research. But until we figure out how to communicate better with the outside world, the outside world, like we're on some sort of island, but we are kind of on an island. Until we figure out a way to actually do that, and not just do it, but to encourage it. I mean, look, if you are brave enough to say that you're going to ignore the criticisms that you're going to get from your colleagues because you are going to get criticized. In fact, it can be detrimental to your academic career to write a popular book, as you all very well know, unless you're willing to just deal with that, to face that, and continue to do so. This is what is at store for all of us.
Absolutely. I think that gets to the heart of one of the things that's so interesting about this book, and why I love this book, is because you can really just it's an accessible writing style that you use. It's not sort of, as we've talked about here a little bit, and as you say in the book more, the arguments that you're really advancing are not particularly new. People have thought in this way about Jesus before, but what you've done is given it sort of an accessibility such that not only the scholar of religion can pick up this book and understand it, but sort of the layperson who's never taken a course in religious studies in their life can pick it up, understand the arguments you're making, and follow it from beginning to end. And so I'm curious, for those of us who want to go into sort of this academic field and are thinking about how do we write, how do we talk about things, sort of if you could just give us some practical advice in terms of what your own writing strategies are. What's your approach to sort of presenting history in this really accessible way?
Well, first of all, learn how to embed your research. Learn how to sort of take the methodology, because what we do here is 90% methodology. Oh yeah, and I have a thesis too. Flip it around. Take the methodology and hide it, put it all the way in the back, because the world doesn't care. The world will just take your expertise at face value, and it doesn't care how you came up with these ideas. Put that in the back, put it in the notes section, hide it. So that's, I think, the first and most important thing to do. Secondly, simplify. And I know that, again, this is where the criticism comes from a lot, and I get a lot of criticism from colleagues who say, oh, this is such a simplistic version of this. Yeah, that's right. It's a simplistic version of it. That's the point of it. Simplify, simplify, simplify. Again, that doesn't mean that you need to simplify your research. There's a place for your research. Again, that's in the back. Put it in the back. But your grandmother doesn't care about your methodology or your research. She just wants to get to your conclusion. And then I would say, finally, and this sounds easy to say, but learn how to write. We have such a specialized writing style in academia with our own secret language that no one can decipher, and that only we ourselves understand. It's like the secret code that we talk to each other about. You have to get past that. You have to get over that. As you were saying, so when I finished Harvard, I had already gotten into a PhD program, and I made a conscious decision to defer entry and instead go and get an MFA in writing, and to learn how to write, because I always knew that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to communicate these incredibly fascinating and consequential ideas that we all sit around in our classrooms talking about, which, I mean, you wouldn't be here if you didn't think that they were cool, right? I mean, that's why you're here. That I wanted to communicate that to people who aren't here. And I needed to know how to write in order to do that. But I got punished for that. When I went to, I got into the program at Berkeley, and they gave me this very wonderful fellowship, and I said to them, I'd like to defer for 2 years. They said, why? I said, because I want to go get an MFA. And they said, well, of what? I want to go, get a writing degree. They couldn't understand. What do you mean? Why would you want to do that? And ultimately, they punished me for it. They said that, okay, well, we'll hold your seat, but not your fellowship. But you won it once. I'm sure you'll win it a second time. And they didn't give it to me the second time. And so, in other words, their argument was, you are now a weaker candidate because of this other degree, not a stronger candidate. That's got to change. Absolutely. That has to change. And that, I think, is the ethos of academia. It has to change. But this is the last thing that I want to say, is that I think it's already changing. I think that, when I speak to university students and graduate students, what I'm confronted with is a different kind of scholar than I remember when I was a student. A scholar that is much more engaged in popular media and in popular discourse. A scholar that's not afraid to break through the ivy walls. And I think so it may take a generation or two more, but I think it's happening, and it can only be good for our society.